My mother called the morning of my 30th birthday to cancel everything, claiming my sister was having a mental breakdown. I drove to the venue to help, only to find my party in full swing, celebrating my sister's fake engagement. So I made 3 phone calls and burned it all down. The dress was hanging on the back of my bedroom door. It was a deep emerald green, silk, floor length, and arguably the most expensive thing I had ever purchased for myself. It caught the morning light streaming in through the blinds, shimmering in a way that usually made my stomach flutter with excitement. Today, however, looking at it just made me feel cold. I sat on the edge of my bed, the phone still clutched in my hand, the screen dark. My thumb was hovering over the call button, trembling slightly, debating whether to call back, to demand clarity, or to simply throw the device across the room. It was 9:15 a.m., my 30th birthday. For months, my mother, Janice, had been orchestrating this event. It was unprecedented. In the hierarchy of our family, I was usually the afterthought, the steady, reliable background noise to the chaotic, vibrant symphony that was my younger sister, Maria. But for the big 3-0, Janice had insisted. She wanted to rent out the Gilded Oak, a historic estate turned venue about 40 minutes out of town. She wanted catering. She wanted a band. She wanted 40 of our closest family and friends. I had been suspicious, of course. I was a corporate event planner by trade. I knew what these things cost, and I knew my parents were comfortable but not extravagant. But Janice had wept, actually wept, saying she wanted to make up for missed moments in my childhood. She wanted to celebrate me. So I let my guard down. I let myself believe it. I even used my industry contacts to secure the venue and the vendors, pulling strings to get them the family and friends, rates that made the whole thing feasible. Then came the call. It hadn't been a happy birthday call. There was no singing. There was no warmth. Anna, Janice's voice had been tight, breathless, the tone she used when she was trying to convey that she was the victim of a situation she had likely created. Don't come to the venue. I had laughed, thinking it was a joke. What? Mom, I have to be there early to check the sound system for the band. I'm leaving in 20 minutes. No, she snapped, the facade of the doting mother cracking instantly. Listen to me, we have to cancel, the party is off. My stomach dropped, a physical sensation of freefall. Off? Mom, the caterers are prepping, the guests are traveling. What are you talking about? It's Maria, she said, her voice dropping to a dramatic whisper. She's in a bad way, Anna. She had a crisis this morning, a complete breakdown, she's hysterical. She can't be around people. Is she hurt? My instincts, honed by 3 decades of managing Maria's crises, kicked in. Do I need to call an ambulance? No, no police, no doctors, Janice hissed. She just needs us. She needs the family. We're going to go to the venue, just us, and calm her down. The open space will be good for her. But we can't have a party, Anna. You understand. We can't celebrate when your sister is suffering like this. It would be cruel. I sat there processing the words. My 30th birthday, canceled because Maria was sad, again. Mom, I said slowly, trying to keep the wobble out of my voice. We can't just cancel. The cancellation fees alone are full price this close to the event. The food is cooked. The band is paid for. Money is not important right now, Janice yelled, and I could hear the echo of the venue in the background. She was already there. Your sister is the priority. Call the guests. Tell them you're sick. Tell them you have the flu, just keep them away. You want me to lie? I want you to be a good sister for once, she screamed, and then the line went dead. I stared at the black mirror of my phone. The silence in my apartment was deafening. I looked back at the green dress. It looked ridiculous now. A costume for a play that had been canceled on opening night. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and humiliating. It wasn't just the party. It was the confirmation of the rule that had governed my entire existence. Maria's feelings, real or imagined, trumped my reality. If Maria was cold, I was expected to set myself on fire to keep her warm. But as the shock began to recede, replaced by a dull, aching thrum of suspicion, I realized something. Janice had said she was at the venue. She said they needed the open space to calm Maria down. But I heard something else in the background of that call, just for a second before she hung up. I heard the clinking of silverware, and I heard a sound check. Check 1, 2. I stood up. I didn't put on the green dress. I put on jeans, a black t-shirt, and my boots. I grabbed my keys. The betrayal wasn't that they can't. Led the party. The betrayal was worse than the lie itself. It was the assumption that I was stupid enough to believe it. The drive to the Gilded Oak usually took 40 minutes. I made it in 25. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned the color of old bone. I didn't turn on the radio. I needed the silence to organize the chaotic storm of thoughts raging in my head. She's having a breakdown. That was the narrative. It was always the narrative. Maria, at 26, had lived a life of almosts and crises. She almost finished college. She almost started a jewelry business. She almost moved to Italy. Each failure was accompanied by a dramatic emotional collapse that required the entire family to drop everything, gather around her, and coo soft words of encouragement until she felt ready to drain our resources for her next venture. I, on the other hand, was the fixer. I was the one who paid the bail, signed the leases, and smoothed over the cracks. I was Anna, the boring one. Anna, the event planner who made other people's dreams look effortless while her own life was expected to be low maintenance. As I turned off the highway and onto the winding country road that led to the estate, I tried to rationalize what I had heard. Maybe the sound check was just the band packing up. Maybe the silverware was the caterers angrily tossing things into bins because they'd been sent home. I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to believe that my mother was just a chaotic enabler, not a monster. I wanted to believe that my sister was actually in pain, not just wielding her fragility like a weapon. I pulled up to the service entrance, a habit from my job. I didn't want to be seen. If Maria was truly in crisis, seeing me might upset her. I parked my beat-up sedan behind a row of hedges that screened the catering vans from the main garden. I killed the engine. The silence returned, but it wasn't total. Through the thick barrier of the hedge, I could hear music, not a sound check. Music, a smooth jazz quartet playing The Way You Look Tonight. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I opened the car door quietly, easing it shut without letting it latch. I crept through the gap in the hedges, mud squelching softly under my boots. The service entrance led to the back of the main banquet hall, which had a wall of floor-to-ceiling glass windows overlooking the garden. I moved toward them, staying low, keeping to the shadows of the decorative pillars. I reached the glass and peered inside. The room was beautiful. I knew it would be. I had designed it. The floral arrangements were cascading towers of white hydrangeas and pale pink roses. The tables were set with the gold-rimmed chargers I had personally sourced from a vendor in the city. The lighting was dimmed to that perfect, golden hour glow. And the people. There were about 40 of them. My Aunt Sarah, my cousin Mike, neighbors I had grown up with. People Janice had told me to call and lie to. They were all there, holding flutes of champagne, laughing, mingling. They weren't looking at the door, waiting for the birthday girl. They were looking at the stage. Standing there, holding a microphone, was Janice. She looked radiant in a silver dress that I knew cost more than my rent. And standing next to her, looking absolutely nothing like a woman in the midst of a mental breakdown, was Maria. Maria was wearing white. A white lace cocktail dress that looked suspiciously bridal. She was beaming, wiping a fake tear from her eye as the room applauded. Above them, strung across the wooden beams of the ceiling, where my Happy 30th Birthday Anna banner was supposed to be, was a new banner. It was professional, glossy, and clearly printed days ago. She said yes, congratulations Maria and Todd. I felt the air leave my lungs. Todd was Maria's boyfriend of 3 months. A guy she had met at a club who claimed to be an entrepreneur but mostly just borrowed money for crypto schemes. They had stolen my venue, they had stolen my catering, they had stolen my guests. I watched as Janice handed the microphone to Maria. Through the glass, I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the performance. Maria placed a hand on her chest, looking humble, looking adored. Todd put his arm around her, preening. My mother had called me an hour ago and told me to lie to these people. She had told me I was sick. She had used my professional connections, my planning, and my birthday as a Trojan horse to throw an engagement party for the golden child, presumably to save money and ensure a good turnout. I leaned my forehead against the cold glass. I felt sick, physically, violently sick. But then I saw the catering manager, Louis. He was walking through the crowd with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. Louis, who I had worked with for 5 years. Louis, who had given me a 40% discount on the food because I had referred him so much business. Last year, I looked at the band. That was the Midnight Trio. The lead singer, Marcus, owed me a favor after I got him a gig at the mayor's gala. A strange, cold calm washed over me. The shaking stopped. The tears dried up, leaving my skin tight. Janice and Maria had planned this perfectly. They knew I would be too responsible to cause a scene, too sick to show up, and too conditioned to just accept that Maria's happiness came first. They thought they had pulled off the heist of the century. But in their haste to steal my labor and my day, they had forgotten one crucial thing. They hadn't signed the contracts. I had. To understand why I didn't just walk in there and start screaming, you have to understand the ecosystem of my family. I was the eldest, the practice run. My father passed away when I was 10, leaving Janice with me and a newborn Maria. Janice dealt with her grief by pouring every ounce of her emotional energy into the baby. Maria became the center of the universe, the reason for living, the fragile doll that could never be dropped. I became the shelf the doll sat on. By 12, I was cooking dinner. By 16, I was working part-time to pay for my own extracurriculars, because the family budget was always allocated to Maria's dance lessons, then Maria's writing lessons, then Maria's brief but expensive interest in competitive cheerleading. I didn't mind the work. I liked the control. It led me to my career. Event planning was just high-stakes crisis management, and I had been managing crises since I was in middle school. Maria, on the other hand, had never been told no. If she wanted a toy, she got it. If she broke something, it was an accident. If she failed a class, the teacher was out to get her. Janice was the architect of this reality. She was a woman who cared deeply about appearances but lacked the substance to maintain them. She lived vicariously through Maria. Maria's successes were Janice's vindication. Maria's failures were tragedies that happened to Janice. I was just the utility player, necessary but uncelebrated. When Janice proposed the 30th birthday party, I should have seen the trap. But the antagonist in this story isn't just a person, it's a pattern. It's the hope that this time will be different. That this time, you've finally earned the love you've been working for. I looked through the window at Todd. He was a sleek, oily character. He worked in sales, though he never specified what he sold. He had been pushing Maria to get married for weeks, likely because he'd found out about the small trust fund my grandmother had left Maria and me that unlocked upon marriage or turning 30. Maria wasn't 30 yet. The picture became crystal clear. Todd wanted the money, Maria wanted the attention, Janice wanted the spectacle of a wedding to brag about at her country club. And none of them wanted to pay for an engagement party. Why spend thousands on a venue when Anna has already booked one? I could imagine Janice saying it. Anna won't mind. She's so busy anyway. We'll just tell her it's a family emergency. She's so good in emergencies. I watched Janice laughing with my Aunt Sarah. Sarah had sent me a card last week saying she couldn't wait to celebrate me. Now, she was drinking my champagne, toasting my sister's engagement, probably thinking I was at home nursing a fever. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It wasn't just theft, it was erasure. They had erased me from my own life to make room for Maria. I looked at my watch. 10:45 a.m. The main course was scheduled to be served at 11:00 a.m. The speeches were likely scheduled for noon. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I had 3 numbers to call. First, Louis, the catering manager. Second, Marcus, the band leader. Third, the venue owner, Mr. Henderson, who had let me book the place on a handshake and a deposit because he'd known me since I was an intern. I unlocked my phone. My thumb hovered over Louis's contact. I could go in there, I could flip a table. I could scream until my throat bled, but that would just make me the crazy one. Janice would spin it. See, Anna is jealous. Anna is unstable. Poor Maria just wanted to share her news. No, anger is loud. Revenge is quiet. If they wanted a party without me, they could have one, but they couldn't have my party. I dialed Louis. Hola, Anna, happy birthday. Louis's voice was warm, cheerful, and completely oblivious. Where are you? The appetizers are flying off the trays. People are hungry. I took a deep breath, turning my back to the window so I wouldn't have to watch them eating the bacon-wrapped dates I had picked out. Louis, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I'm not coming. What, is everything okay? No, I said, my voice steady, devoid of the emotion that was churning in my gut. Louis, look at the banner, look at the stage. There was a pause. I could hear the background chatter through the phone. Then a confused root. Stealing? The engagement banner? Yeah, your mom said it was a surprise, a double celebration. She said you agreed to share the party. She lied. Ikwe. She lied, Louis. She called me an hour ago and told me to stay home. She told me the party was canceled. She stole the venue. She hijacked the event. Silence on the other end. Then, a low, dangerous tone I had only heard Louis use once before, when a bride had thrown a wine glass at his staff. She did what? This isn't my party anymore, Louis, and I'm not paying for it. But the contract, Louis stammered, it's in your name. Exactly, I said, leaning against the rough brick of the building. The contract is for Anna's 30th birthday celebration. It specifies the nature of the event. It specifies the guest of honor. By changing the event to an engagement party without the signatory's consent, they have voided the agreement. Furthermore, since I am the client, and I am instructing you to cease services. You want me to stop? I want you to pack up, right now. If they want foods, they can order pizza. But they aren't eating the filet mignon I paid for. Not on my dime, not today. I could hear the gears turning in his head. Louis was a businessman, but he was also a man of intense loyalty. He hated being played almost as much as I did. The filet is already seared, Anna, he said softly. Donate it, I said. Take it to the shelter on 5th. I'll pay for the food cost, Louis. I won't stiff you, but I refuse to pay for the service. I refuse to have your staff serving them like royalty while I'm sitting in the dirt. Consider it done, Louis said. Happy birthday, Anna. I'm sorry your family is like this. Me too, thank you, Louis. I hung up, one down. I dialed Marcus next. The band leader answered on the first ring, probably checking his phone between sets. Anna, where's the birthday girl? We're about to start the upbeat set. Change of plans, Marcus. Look at the banner. I repeated the explanation. Marcus, a guy who had seen every kind of family drama imaginable in his 20 years of wedding gigs, didn't even hesitate. That's cold, he muttered. That's ice cold. You want silence. I want silence. You got it. We're on a break in 5 anyway. We just won't come back. Perfect. Finally, I called Mr. Henderson. The venue owner was older, a stickler for rules. He answered from his office, likely on the property. Mr. Henderson, it's Anna. Anna, happy birthday, dear. Everything running smoothly out there. Mr. Henderson, I need to cancel the booking. Immediately. Cancel, but the party is happening. I can see it on the monitor. That is not the party I booked, I said, my voice finally cracking just a little. My mother lied to me. She told me the event was canceled so she could use the venue for my sister's engagement party. I am not there. I was uninvited to my own birthday. I did not authorize this use of the space. There was a long silence. Mr. Henderson was a man who prided himself on the integrity of the Gilded Oak. He didn't run a frat house. He ran a premier establishment. "She uninvited you?" he asked, his voice stiff. "Yes, and Mr. Henderson, I'm looking at the contract. Clause 4, Section B, use of the venue for purposes other than stated in the agreement without prior written consent constitutes a breach. Also, liability. If someone gets hurt at this unauthorized engagement party, and I'm the one on the insurance paperwork." "Say no more," he interrupted. "I'll come down there myself." "Wait," I said. "Give the caterers and the band 10 minutes to clear out. I want them to realize what's happening slowly. I want them to feel the air leave the room." "I'll give them 15, Mr. Henderson said. "I'm sorry, Anna." I hung up the phone. My hands were steady now. I crouched by the window, invisible in the shadows, and prepared to watch the show. It started subtly. The music stopped. The jazz quartet finished their song, and instead of segueing into the next number or taking a short 5-minute break, they began to break down their stands. The drummer started unscrewing his cymbals. The bassist unhooked his amp. Inside, the guests didn't notice at first. The chatter was loud, the champagne was flowing. Janice was holding court at the center table, laughing loudly, her hand on Maria's arm. Then the food service stopped. Waiters who had been circulating with trays suddenly turned around and walked back into the kitchen. Guests who were reaching for a canapé were left grasping at air. A few people looked around, confused. I saw my Aunt Sarah tap a passing waiter on the shoulder. He shook his head politely, said something brief, and kept walking. Sarah's face scrunched in confusion. She looked over at Janice. Janice hadn't noticed yet. She was too busy basking. Then the kitchen doors swung open. But instead of servers coming out with the main course, a line of staff emerged carrying crates. They began clearing the buffet tables that had been set up for the sides. They weren't replenishing, they were stripping it bare. The room began to quiet down. The murmur of conversation shifted from celebratory to confused. Janice finally looked up. She saw the band packing away the drum kit. She frowned, excused herself from Maria, and marched over to Marcus. I couldn't hear the words through the glass, but I knew the body language. Janice pointed at the stage, a sharp, demanding gesture. "Play." Marcus shook his head. He looked calm, bored even. He pointed to his watch, then pointed to the door. Janice's face went red. She stomped her foot, actually stomped it like a toddler. She pointed at Maria, invoking the name of the princess. Marcus just shrugged, picked up his guitar case, and walked off the stage. The silence in the room was absolute now. Every eye was on Janice. She spun around, looking for a target. She spotted Louis, who was directing his staff to roll the warming carts out the side door. She charged at him. I saw her mouth moving rapidly. She was screaming, "Where are you going? We haven't eaten." Louis stopped. He stood tall, a head taller than her. He didn't yell. He simply crossed his arms and spoke. Whatever he said, it hit her like a physical blow. Janice recoiled. Her mouth fell open. She looked around the room, her eyes wide, panic finally setting in. She pulled out her phone. My phone buzzed in my hand. Mom calling. I let it ring. I watched her through the glass as she listened to my voicemail. She looked furious. She dialed again. My phone buzzed again. Mom calling. I declined the call. Then I saw her typing. A second later, a text popped up. "Pick up the phone. The staff is leaving. They are ruining your sister's moment. Tell them to stay." I looked at the text. I looked at her. I typed back, "I can't, I'm sick, remember." I watched her read it, her head snapped up. She looked around the room, scanning the windows, scanning the doors. She knew. Her eyes locked onto the window where I was hiding. The reflection of the sky made it hard for her to see in, but she sensed me. I stepped out from the shadows of the pillar. I walked right up to the glass. Our eyes met. The color drained from her face completely. She looked like a ghost. I held up my phone, showing her the screen where I had the group chat for the Anna's 30th guest list pulled up. The one she had told me to message with my sickness lie. I hadn't sent the lie. Instead, I had drafted a new message. To all my friends and family, I am not sick. My mother canceled my birthday party this morning to hijack the venue for Maria. The vendors are leaving because the contracts are in my name and I will not pay for my own erasure. If you want to celebrate me, I'll be at O'Malley's pub in town. If you want to stay for a party with no food and no music, feel free. I hit send. Inside the hall, a ripple effect occurred. Dozens of phones beeped or buzzed simultaneously. It was a wave of sound, a digital chorus of revelation. Heads went down, screens were illuminated. I saw my cousin Mike read the text. His eyebrows shot up. He looked at Janice, then at me standing outside the window. He didn't look angry at me, he looked impressed. I saw Aunt Sarah read it. She covered her mouth with her hand, looking from her phone to Maria, who was sitting at the head table, looking confused and increasingly agitated. Maria hadn't checked her phone. She was looking at Todd, pulling on his sleeve, asking why the music had stopped. Janice was paralyzed. She was staring at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She banged on the glass. Anna, I could hear her muffled scream through the double-paned window. Stop this, you're ruining everything. I didn't move, I just watched. Mr. Henderson entered the room. He wasn't subtle. He walked in with 2 security guards, burly guys in black blazers who usually just checked IDs at the gate. He walked straight up to Janice. He held a clipboard. The room went deadly silent again. Even the murmurs died down. I couldn't hear Mr. Henderson, but I knew the script. Breach of contract, unauthorized event, liability concerns, please vacate the premises. Janice started pointing at me through the window. She was screaming now, full-blown hysterics. She was trying to blame me. She grabbed Mr. Henderson's arm. One of the security guards stepped forward, gently but firmly removing her hand. That was the breaking point. Todd, the fiancé, stood up. He looked at the empty buffet tables. He looked at the departing band. He looked at the security guards. He looked at Maria. You said this was paid for, I saw him mouth. Maria stood up, tears streaming down her face. It is, my parents' Anna, she was flailing, trying to find an excuse. Your sister is paying, Todd asked, his face darkening. I thought you said your parents were rich. I thought you said you had money. The room was quiet enough that even through the glass, I could hear Maria's desperate shriek. I will. When I get married, I get the trust fund. A collective gasp went through the room. My Aunt Sarah stood up slowly. The trust fund, she asked, her voice carrying. Maria, is that why you're doing this, for the money? Maria froze. She realized she had said the quiet part out loud. I turned away from the window. I didn't need to see the rest. The entropy had begun. The system was collapsing under the weight of its own lies. I walked back to my car. My phone was blowing up with texts. Mike, holy SHT, Anna. Legend. Sarah, I am so sorry. We had no idea. Leaving now. Best friend Jess, I'm at the pub, ordering shots. Get here. But as I reached for the door handle, I heard the side door of the venue burst open. Anna. It was Maria. She ran out, stumbling in her heels, her white dress trailing in the mud. She looked deranged. Her mascara was running, her hair was coming loose. How could you? She screamed, running toward me. You jealous be *TCH. You ruined my engagement. You ruined my life. She lunged at me. I didn't flinch. I just stepped to the side. She stumbled past me, catching herself on the hood of my car. I didn't ruin anything, Maria, I said calmly. I just stopped paying for it. You have everything, she sobbed, sliding down to the ground, heedless of the mud staining her white dress. You have a job, you have a life, you're strong, I have nothing. I just wanted one day. I just wanted everyone to look at me. Everyone always looks at you, Maria, I said, looking down at her. That's the problem. You think being looked at is the same thing as being loved, and you think stealing my light makes you shine brighter. Janice appeared in the doorway, panting. Maria, oh God, Maria. She ran to her, glaring at me with pure hatred. You are dead to us, Anna. Do you hear me? Dead. Good, I said, because I'm done being the ghost that pays your bills. I got in the car. I started the engine. As I backed out, I saw Todd walking out of the main entrance. He didn't look at Maria. He was on his phone, walking fast toward his own car. He didn't look back. I drove away. I didn't look back either. O'Malley's pub was the antithesis of the Gilded Oak. Where the estate was gold, leaf, and crystal, O'Malley's was dark wood, sticky floors, and the smell of stale beer and comfort. It was a place where you went to hide or to celebrate being hidden. I walked in, the bell above the door chiming with a cheerful irrelevance that grated on my nerves. My hands were still shaking, not from fear anymore, but from the adrenaline dump of the parking lot confrontation. I expected to find an empty bar, maybe just nursing a beer. Instead, I walked into a standing ovation. It was small, scattered, and hesitant, but it was there. My cousin Mike raised his pint glass. Jess, sitting at a high top, clapped slowly. Even Aunt Sarah, usually the peacemaker, the one who would smooth over a hurricane with a casserole, looked up from her white wine with eyes that were red-rimmed but clear. The birthday girl, Mike said, his voice grim but welcoming. Or should I say, the escape artist. I collapsed onto the stool next to Jess. She didn't say anything, just slid a shot of whiskey toward me. I stared at the amber liquid. I didn't drink it. I just needed to look at something that wasn't my mother's face. They're saying you had a mental break, Aunt Sarah said softly. She was scrolling through her phone. Janice posted on Facebook. She says you got confused about the dates, showed up causing a scene, and that you're unwell due to the stress of being single at 30. I let out a laugh that sounded like a bark. Of course she did. She has to control the narrative. If she's the victim, she doesn't have to pay the cancellation fees. She also said, Sarah continued, her voice hardening, that you stole the deposit money intended for Maria's wedding gift. The air in the pub changed. The warmth evaporated. She said what? I whispered. It's on her timeline, Mike said, turning his phone around. Long post. Lots of crying emojis. Says she trusted you with the funds for Maria's future, and you used it to book a venue for yourself out of jealousy, and now the money is gone. I stared at the screen. The lies were breathtaking in their architecture. She had taken the truth that I booked the venue and twisted it into an embezzlement scheme. She wasn't just ruining my birthday, she was coming for my professional reputation. I was an event planner. If people thought I stole funds, I was finished. She's coming here, Jess said suddenly, looking out the window. I spun around on the stool. A familiar Mercedes had just screeched to a halt in front of the pub. Janice didn't park. She abandoned the vehicle. She stormed out, Maria trailing behind her like a vengeful shadow. Lock the door, Mike said, standing up. No, I saw. Id standing up too. My legs felt like lead, but my spine felt like steel. Let them in. If she wants an audience, I'll give her one. The door flew open, banging against the wall. The afternoon patrons of O'Malley's, mostly old men watching horse racing, looked up in alarm. Janice marched straight to me. She didn't look at her sister Sarah. She didn't look at her nephew Mike. She looked only at me, her eyes manic, her makeup smeared. You fix this, she hissed, pointing a finger in my face. Right now, you get on your phone, you call the caterer back, you call the band back, and you tell everyone it was a misunderstanding. You tell them you're paying double. No, I said. Do you have any idea what you've done? She screamed, her voice cracking. Maria is humiliated. Todd is gone, he drove off, he thinks we're frauds. You are frauds, I said, my voice rising to match hers. You tried to grift a wedding out of my birthday. It's family money, Maria shouted, stepping out from behind Janice. It's all family money, you don't earn it, you just hoard it. You have that job, you have your apartment, you have everything. Why couldn't I have this one thing? Because it wasn't yours, I said, and neither is the money. You stole it, Janice shrieked, playing to the room now, turning to look at the regulars at the bar. She stole her sister's dowry, she's a thief. That was it, the snap. I reached into my bag, I didn't pull out a weapon, I pulled out my laptop. I slammed it onto the sticky bar top. Mike, hook this up to the TV, I said, tossing him the HDMI cable I always carried for client presentations. Anna, what are you doing? Aunt Sarah asked, looking terrified. Mom wants to talk about money, I said, my voice deadly calm. She wants to talk about who paid for what, so let's talk. Mike, bless him, didn't hesitate. He plugged the cable into the pub's main TV, the one usually reserved for football. I opened the folder labeled Family Finances. It was a folder I had started 5 years ago, when Janice had borrowed my credit card for emergency car repairs that turned out to be a spa weekend. This, I said, pointing to the screen as a spreadsheet appeared, is a breakdown of every expense I have covered for this family in the last decade. The screen was a wall of numbers. 2021, I recited, scrolling down. Maria's rent, $12,000, paid by Anna. Janice said it was a loan, never repaid. Stop it, Janice whispered, her face going pale. 2022, I continued, my voice gaining strength. Maria's DUI legal fees, $5,000, paid by Anna to keep it out of the papers, to protect the family name. The pub was silent, even the old men were watching. 2023, the business loan for Maria's jewelry line, $8,000, paid by Anna. The business lasted 3 weeks. You're lying, Maria screamed, but she was backing away. And finally, I said, opening the bank statements for the party. Today, the venue deposit, the catering contract, the band, all paid from my business account, not a family fund. My earnings, my sweat. I turned to the room. I looked at Aunt Sarah, who had her hand over her mouth. There is no family trust for the wedding, I said, delivering the final blow. Grandma's trust fund, the one Maria is waiting for. I looked directly at Maria. It doesn't exist anymore, Maria. Mom drained it. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I had ever felt. It was a vacuum. What? Maria whispered. She turned to Janice. What did she say? Janice wasn't looking at Maria. She was looking at the floor, her whole body trembling. Show them the statement, Anna, I said to myself, clicking the file. It appeared on the screen. The trust account history, a long list of withdrawals. Casino, Neiman Marcus, casino, cash withdrawal. The balance at the bottom read, $14.52. She spent it, I said, my voice devoid of pity. She spent it all years ago. She's been pushing you to marry Todd not because it unlocks the money, but because she needed you to find a rich husband to support her once the lies ran out. Maria looked at the screen, then she looked at Janice. The realization washed over her face, a mix of horror and absolute betrayal. The golden child realized she wasn't the treasure, she was the retirement plan. You spent it, Maria's voice was a high, thin keen. You told me it was safe. You told me I was rich. I did it for us, Janice cried, grabbing Maria's arm. To keep up appearances, to give you the life you deserved. Get off me, Maria shoved her mother. It wasn't a playful shove. It was violent. Janice stumbled back, hitting a bar stool. You're broke, Maria screamed. We're broke. I'm not, I said, closing the laptop. You too are. I looked at Aunt Sarah. I'm sorry you had to see this, but I'm done covering for them. I'm done being the bank, and I'm done being the scapegoat. I pointed at the do. Get out. Janice looked around the room. She saw the judgment in her sister's eyes. She saw the disgust in her nephew's face. She saw the ruin of her own making reflected in the TV screen. She didn't fight, she didn't scream, she just crumbled. She turned and walked out the door, looking suddenly very old and very small. Maria stood there for a second longer, looking at me. She looked like she wanted to beg. She looked like she wanted to ask if she could stay at my place, if I could fix this, if I could handle the crisis one last time. I just shook my head. Maria turned and ran out after her mother, not to comfort her, but to scream at her. We could hear them yelling at each other in the parking lot even after the heavy wooden door swung shut. The silence in the pub after they left was different. It wasn't awkward, it was peaceful. Aunt Sarah was the first to move. She walked over to me, wrapped her arms around my shoulders, and held me tight. She smelled like lavender and expensive Chardonnay. "I didn't know," she whispered into my hair. "Anna, I swear, I didn't know about the money. I didn't know that she had done that to you." "I know," I said, leaning into the hug. "She's good at what she does." "She's not good anymore," Mike said, raising his glass again. "She's done. Everyone knows now. I'm putting the truth in the family group chat right now. No more spin." I watched him type. It felt like a weight being lifted off my chest, a physical release of 30 years of pressure. The secret keeper was retired. The fallout was swift and absolute. Todd didn't just leave, he vanished. He blocked Maria on every platform and, according to rumors, moved back to the city to find a new mark. Without a rich husband and without a trust fund, Maria was forced to face reality for the first time in her life. She moved into a small apartment with 2 roommates and got a job as a receptionist. It wasn't glamorous, and she hated it, but for the first time, she was paying her own bills. Janice tried to sue me. She actually found a lawyer who sent me a threatening letter claiming defamation of character and infliction of emotional distress. I sent the lawyer the folder, the same one I had shown in the pub, plus a few extra receipts for the fraudulent credit card use I had covered up years ago. The lawsuit was dropped 3 days later. Janice sold the big house, she had to pay off the debts she had been hiding, and moved into a condo in a neighboring town. She sends me emails sometimes, oscillating between begging for forgiveness and blaming me for her downfall. I have a filter set up. They go straight to a folder marked trash. 2 months after the party, I finally celebrated my birthday. I didn't rent a venue. I didn't hire a band. I invited Aunt Sarah, Mike, Jess, and a few close friends to my apartment. I ordered pizza from the place down the street, the good pizza with the truffle oil. We sat on my floor, drinking wine and laughing until our sides hurt. At one point, I excused myself and went to my bedroom. I saw the emerald green dress hanging on the door. It had been there since that morning, a ghost of the girl I used to be. The girl who needed approval. The girl who thought she could buy her family's love with the perfect party. I took it off the hanger. I put it on. It fit perfectly. The silk was cool against my skin. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like a victim. I didn't look like a fix-it girl. I looked like a woman who owned her own life. I walked back out into the living room. Jess whistled. Mike clapped. Aunt Sarah smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Who are you all dressed up for?" Jess teased. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat down in the center of the room, surrounded by the people who actually loved me. "For me," I said, "just for me."